slow fade every day, but I'm still not very good. That was actually really good. So I don't know what you're talking about. Um, Great. We are recording. Aaron, do you want to say a quick hello, or we can just go to the next slide if you'd like?
Yeah, I'll say hello. Yeah, welcome everyone to DemoComp. Super excited to see you here. Super excited to have Danny as my co-host. I hear he's very funny, so we can rate him on his jokes as he goes along.
Oh, great.
Um, if you're a Mod Zero or prospective student, you're in the right space. Welcome. Um, I also think I see a couple family and friends here. We're super excited to have you in our agenda. I think we already did most of part one, our welcome. Uh, we'll do a few presentations. We have 6 today. Some of them are going to be live, which is super exciting, no pressure. A couple pre-recorded. And then we'll have some breakout rooms while our judges deliberate. So you can pop around and visit with the different makers of the projects and chat with them and talk about their experience. And then we will come back and our winners will be announced. I think I got it all. Did I miss anything, Danny?
No, that is great. Yeah, super excited, and I hope everyone's feeling good and ready to go. We have some really great judges today. Um, One I haven't talked to in forever, so I'm excited. I'm gonna just go in a breakout room and just chat with her all day. But we have Rachel, Sally, and Stephanie as our judges today. And I only know Sally, but I'm assuming Rachel and Stephanie are also really good people as well. So we are all in a good company.
I would agree. All right. Are we ready for some demos? All right. In no
Let's do it.
particular order, probably just the order that our slide creator remembered to put them in our slide deck. We'll kick off with 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Ooh.
I'm going to stop sharing because I am going to assume that you all are going to want to share something.
Yeah, I do have some slides. Let me get them going here. Oh, I lost my Zoom. Sorry. All right. Welcome everyone, and thanks for taking the time out to check out our projects. Today I'm going to demo my app, which is called 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's a custom movie trivia puzzle challenge game. And rather than explaining too much, I'm going to have like a little bit of a pre-recorded walkthrough of how the game works, and then I'll come back and talk about some of the stuff. And as well, if anybody would like, if I can get it up, there we go. I have some links if you'd like to check out the game yourself, my app architecture, or also my Turing portfolio site. So let's see. There you go. So this is also the link to the app. This is like a preview of things to come, I guess. And if there is actually, I think I have to share sound as well. Yeah. Okay. So if anybody has any problems hearing, just let me know. This is like something out that's new to me. All right, hello and welcome to my app. This is 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. So when we visit my app, you're given 6 possible movie trivia puzzle challenges based around a movie star. When you select one, if you're not sure where to proceed from here, there is information on how the game works, but I'll walk you through that. And so what we're going to do is try to move these movie cards and these co-star cards around in such a way that on either side of each movie is 2 stars from that movie. So that would be like a valid orientation. And if you can get all the pieces on the board, you've successfully solved a puzzle challenge. If you're kind of working your way through the puzzle challenge and you feel stuck, you feel like, oh, maybe I made a mistake, the hint button will then give you some helpful feedback. But again, we don't need that. We can work through this together. And so, yeah, if you are able to successfully solve the puzzle, you're given some positive feedback and a woohoo. And I think it's fun, it's unique, and it was an idea that I came up with. So I'm proud of the final result. I would say that this puzzle user interface was one of the bigger technical challenges that I had, because I wasn't sure how to design this game in such a way that it was intuitive, and there wasn't a steep learning curve, but it made sense to the user. So I solved that problem in several different ways. One thing is that these pieces, these board spots, they're all custom SVGs that are capable of taking an image URL as a React prop, and they can clip the image based on a custom image path, and that's how I kind of created these pieces. And I think it looks really nice. And then also I pulled in a React library called D&D Kit, and that gave me the ability to move and reset the location for different DOM elements, and so that's how I'm able to move these cards around and place them in different places. That kit I also applied different input sensors to, so that you can play this game on a touchscreen, you can play it with any sort of pointer device, and you can also play it with a keyboard if you had any limitations there. So overall, I think the UI is intuitive, and I'm proud of the final result. So I hope you enjoy the game. Here we go. So here's a peek at some of the tech that I used and my overall app architecture. One technical choice that I made a few days into development was to move local component state to a state store using a library called ZooStand. There's a lot to track in this game as far as the position of various elements and the state of the game. And once that became overly complex and cumbersome, that's kind of when I made the decision. And I'll be honest, my first reaction of working with it was it felt a little bit like moving backwards, because I was breaking something that was working for the purpose of making it cleaner and more organized. The choice did take time away from developing other features, but ultimately I do think it made my code easier to follow. And in the future, if me or another dev was to work on this this project and further it, having this state store would make the app logic easier to follow. One other interesting choice that I made in developing just this MVP is I built a custom Express server API, and I deployed it to Vercel, and it's capable of making requests to the MovieDB API. And it also can read and write to local JSON files using Node's file system library. This was a really good choice, I think, for getting an MVP and proving my concept. But this is an area that perhaps in the future I could improve, and I could migrate it to some sort of database management system. As far as that choice goes, I think any relational DBMS would probably be a really good choice, since the data already exists in JSON objects. But that's not something that I needed for the MVP, and that's just something I could improve upon in the future. So yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for checking out my game, and I'd love to answer any questions.
Let's give a nice virtual round of applause for Seth. Woo! Do we have any questions for Seth?
And specifically, we're gonna look for questions from the judges right now. If non-judges have questions, bring them to the breakout rooms during deliberation. So of our three judges, if you have a question for Seth, if you could raise your hand so that you come to the top of the screen for all of our viewers, that would be awesome. Sally.
This is super awesome. You can answer this for the D&D kit, is that what it's called? Or the ZooStand. I'm curious how you chose those libraries and what made you choose those over any other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to this project, I was actually working on a group project, and the goal of that was to work with some sort of new stretch tech. And so I had researched a lot of different stretch techs. I had ideas of some things that perhaps I could incorporate into future projects, that sort of stuff. And I had read some docs and tried to get an understanding of what I thought would be easy to work with and integrate. So when it came to D&D kit, there's 2 or 3 pretty popular React drag and drop libraries, but that one is still being supported, and it had a lot of support online. So that's why I chose that. And then Zoo Stand, I would recommend to anybody that's like looking to dip their toes in working with a state store for state management, because just from my personal experience, I thought it had like a smaller learning curve. It was easier to pick up for like somebody working with it for the first time, and it wasn't as scary as Redux or one of these bigger libraries that, like on a time crunch, I was like, oh, would I have time for that? And so yeah, it's just really, I think they both had great docs. I kind of had an idea of like what their purpose was, and when I saw a use case for it, I kind of like jumped at the opportunity for that.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question, Seth. Great demo, really cool. I was especially excited when I saw the diagram. Love a good diagram. I was curious about the name. What inspired the name, and what inspired you to kind of go down this path? Do you like games? Do you have a history of games?
Yeah, yeah, I think I do for some reason gravitate towards like game logic for a lot of these projects, because it's like it's more complex than people realize, I think, and it's really fun to work with. So I think, yeah, I had this idea for this app. I kind of like understood roughly what the logic, like what the puzzle would look like. But actually, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon is like a theory. There's probably Wikipedia articles you can like look up or whatever. And the idea is that like you are not related to, but like connected to anyone in the universe based on like 6 degrees of separation. So let's just say like, how do we get from you to Kevin Bacon? It's like, okay, so maybe you have like an uncle who has a friend whose like brother is like a Hollywood agent who worked with Kevin Bacon's agent or something, right? It's like you don't know Kevin Bacon, but through 6 degrees you can get to anyone on the planet. And so the name kind of fit. And then in my app, there's like 6 co-stars, 6 movies, and everything has to be very like interconnected in order to like even create one of these puzzles, which is so, yeah, that's how I got it.
Very cool. Is there any other questions from our judges?
I do have a question. I'm sorry. I'm not sure how I can raise my hand. It's been a
All
while since I
good.
used Zoom. Yeah, I'm curious, Seth, that's great. I'm curious about what is one of the most difficult technical challenges that you ran into when building this application?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I really think the big one was probably the puzzle itself, both like the UI and then like handling the logic of something to think about is like a user could start this puzzle anywhere. So when they're placing a piece, like the Samuel L. Jackson piece from my demo, if they're placing Uma Thurman, like are they going to place her in the top star bubble every time? And the answer is like absolutely not. Will they start solving the puzzle clockwise or counterclockwise? And so to solve it, I built or I worked with like a JavaScript's classes. And so I created like a puzzle class that's capable of like tracking the current state of the puzzle, checking for errors in the puzzle, and also like checking if the puzzle is complete as well. But yeah, that kind of goes back to the previous question. I think it's neat. Like working with game logic inherently is like more complicated than maybe like at first glance. And so building that logic, building the UI, and it was all like so like sort of unique was a big challenge. But I'm yeah, glad I gave it a try, and I like the final product.
Cool. Rachel.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to raise my hand on here either. I was kind of looking around for that. Um, First of all, I love the concept of this. I don't think I would do very well on this game, but I guess that's what the feedback is for. You mentioned that I think your next iteration would include migrating to some sort of database management system. My question is, if you could do one thing differently about your project, if you were to start the project over again, is there anything that you would change?
Um, yeah, I thought I've had time to think about this, and I'm glad you asked. So when I first had this idea for this project and like how these puzzles would be created, like how you could come up with a puzzle. I actually thought that, naively, that I could write like maybe an algorithm that would like ping like a movie database, and I could work with the logic to like put these puzzles together in like an automated way or something. And it turns out that like the puzzle design I made is like pretty restrictive, because you have to find a chain of exactly 6 movies that like 2 of the people have worked in, but not 3. Um, it is much harder to create one of these puzzles than I realized. And so if I like made the puzzle like actually a little less restrictive, which would require perhaps like a little more logic in building it, there might be ways to like create puzzles easier, and like maybe some could just have like a connection of 5 stars. Maybe some, Kevin Bacon isn't at all, but the chain makes sense. And so, yeah, the concept I think is really neat and cool, but man, coming up with these puzzles is really challenging, and I probably could have like made that easier on myself for sure.
All right. Thank you, Seth. Another nice little round of applause. Golf clap. Sweet. Okay. Aaron, can you share your screen again? Or actually, we won't need you to do that. I'm tripping. Our next project that we will be viewing is Guardian Angel. So if you would like to share your screen, Guardian Angel folk.
All right. Sorry, just moving the Zoom stuff out of the way. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Lance, and today I will be joined by my classmate Corey to present our Mod 3 consultancy project. Guardian Angel is a full stack application built in Ruby on Rails that is dedicated to providing a secure and supportive environment for individuals seeking help with their mental health challenges. By using a Sinatra microservice to consume the Throughline API, we are able to provide users with helpful resources on a variety of topics that they may be struggling with. We also chose to implement a PostgreSQL database on the back end, thus allowing users to create their own private gratitude lists when they are signed in. Users can sign in either by creating an account on our website or by using their Gmail account through the use of OAuth. For the front end, we utilized Bootstrap to adhere to the wireframes that we created during the planning phase of development. And with that being said, I will give a quick demo of our website. So this is the home page. Welcome to Guardian Angel. Has some options down here. First, I will show the About section. So this just, if it's your first time visiting, this gives a little bit of insight into what the website is all about. And you can see down here, if you need emergency services, you could click here, or the emergency services at the top of the page. And this will bring you to a list of services. This is what we are gaining from that Throughline API. And for each of these, you could see we have all of these. We have some pagination. So there's a second page for whatever you may need. Clicking on one of these will bring you to the show page. So it'll tell you like a phone number, SMS, web chat, website, any kinds of like things that you might need. It brings you to their site here. Topics covered. So if any of these apply to you, this resource will be good to help you with that. And then this is just some location information, because some of them are based in other time zones or other countries. So next, I will show off the login using OAuth. So we go here. We could either enter our email and password manually, or we can go through Google. So I will just sign in with this. Click continue. And this brings you to your account. And I don't have a phone number in there just because I didn't want to put one in for the presentation. But we could go to account details. We could edit those, or we can go to our journal entries. And in here, you can create a gratitude, and writing down gratitudes has been scientifically proven to improve one's mental well-being. Getting yourself in a positive mindset by like jotting down stuff that you're grateful for or things that went well are very good for your mental health. So if we go in here, we can just pick today, say, I love Turing, Already said that, but we'll save it. Brings us back here, and then we can go, and these are all the gratitudes that I've listed today. And then in here, we are bringing in an inspirational quote from another API. And then this can go back to all entries. And then to log out, we just click the home, brings you back here, and you are logged out. So that concludes the website walkthrough. Next, we can go to our Miro board and show off some of our planning process and the structure, and I'll pass it off to Corey to explain some of our MVP.
Thanks, Lance. Lance went over some of this already, but in a little more detail, we decided on a service-oriented architecture with our main backend application focused on handling the core business logic and managing the future multiple API calls. This connects to our front-end app where we use Bootstrap to enable a design that is mobile friendly. We have a database here as well to handle user data. And the intention here was to allow us an easier time with implementing Google Open Authentication. Lastly, we have a Sinatra microservice, which connects to the Throughline API. This allows a non-authenticated user, Lance showed in the About section, to access the emergency services. We have caching for the views, as well as caching for the Throughline API token, which expires every 2 hours. In the next phase of this project, which Lance will get into more, we will enable additional search criteria for the Throughline API and route that through the backend application, making the microservice design decision have a little more weight than it does right now. With that, I will pass it back to you, Lance.
All right. So once we had established our MVP at the beginning of this, we cooked up some wireframes. I won't go super in depth on these, but it basically shows the user journey from the landing page. And then we decided to implement Bootstrap to best handle making these, as well as some mobile-friendly design. So lastly, I can discuss a couple things about phase 2, which are just a couple extensions that if we decided to continue to work on this project, we would add in. We wanted to maybe include a meditation API for like some breathing exercises if somebody's experiencing anxiety and needs to like cool down a little bit. I know those helped me. I was doing that a little bit before this presentation, honestly. Also, something with an AA meeting information that could be helpful to some users. This could make it all kind of like a comprehensive all-in-one website for like anything that you might need help with. And then we also wanted to implement maybe some API calls from this journal backend that was getting all of these journal entries in order for a user to also connect to the Throughline API that provides all of those helpful resources that I had showed you on the website, and maybe offer some additional search parameters like based off of mood or like a drop-down selection so a user can pick like what they might need help with, and it'll automatically bring them somewhere instead of them having to go through these lists of resources. Yeah, so with that, I think that concludes our presentation of Guardian Angel. And if there are any questions from anybody, Corey and I would be happy to answer. Thank you.
Round of applause for Lance and Corey. Yeah, I'll just add my sound effects. Any questions from the judges?
I can go first. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I think y'all kind of touched on this, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about why you chose to use a microservice instead of have everything in one Rails app.
I can take that.
Okay.
And then, of course, Lance, if there's something to add. So initially, or partially, I should say, project requirements. We wanted to, learn a stretch tech. Sinatra was new to us. So that's one reason. But, more a design decision. It's so we wanted a lightweight service to be able to access the Throughline API for non-authenticated users. And we wanted, that caching and sort of that process to be its standalone lightweight process. Then in this second phase, when we add additional search parameters to the query, that's handled by the backend, and then it would go through the backend. So yeah, the design decision was, thinking that it would just be a lightweight, quick API call that we could have completely separate from these, more complex queries.
Okay.
Any other questions from our judges? Okay, we saw a hand raise. There we go.
I figured out where it was.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I was curious where this idea came from and if there's a specific target audience for this application that you thought of, if you were to sell this application specifically, who that might be.
Yeah. So initially, honestly, this idea just came up just so there would be some choices for our consultancy project for Mod 3. And this ended up getting selected for the whole class to work on. So there were 7 of us, all back-end devs, doing this. As for a target audience, I feel like there isn't a specific demographic or niche of people. My idea going into it was that it would kind of be something that everybody could use, whether they're dealing with something super serious or if they're just having a rough day. This could be somewhere that they could go and either, get a resource that can help them with whatever they're dealing with, or just write a gratitude. But yeah, it's pretty much supposed to be marketed for anybody, whether they're having mental health issues or not. Yeah, Corey, if you want to add anything to that, go ahead. But that was pretty much my idea of things going into it at the beginning.
Yeah, I would just summarize with anybody struggling with any sort of mental health.
Very cool. I know I would definitely use that. Yeah, looking back at gratitudes that I've written in the past is really, really cool. So maybe a cool design feature for the future. But remember when you wrote this kind of thing, and you're like, wow, look where I'm at now, kind of thing. Rachel.
Yeah, I really like the idea, and there are many times where I've looked back on things that I've written down, and even when life is rough right now, looking back on those things I found really helpful too. I wanted to ask, with all the members, with all the team members on your team, were there any instances where you and people on the team had different ideas on how to do things, and how would you handle technical decision making as a group?
Yeah, so pretty much at the beginning, luckily, it was pretty easy to get some ideas rolling. Everybody being on the same project as an entire class, we all got together pretty much multiple times a day, every day for a while, just for the planning process, just going through lists of ideas for potential features and listing them on our Miro. We also had a Jamboard, rest in peace Jamboard, if you know, you know. Yeah, so we pretty much would just talk on Zoom and try to spitball ideas and then eventually narrow it down to something we thought we would be able to build in a reasonable amount of time with what we knew how to do, and also a couple stretch techs. But it was definitely new and took some getting used to because it was our first time ever working with microservices. So we were used to working on big monolith Rails backend apps. And now all of a sudden we had, it's not a lot, but 3 separate applications that all had to talk to each other. So figuring that out and getting everything to work properly required a lot of communication. So we were basically in Zoom all together, all the time throughout this project.
I think I'll add just very quickly, there's a hodgepodge component to this app where, it's sort of like a playground and someone was like, I want to implement Google OAuth. And another person was like, I want to play with Bootstrap. And somebody else was like, I want to play with Sinatra. So there is that sort of component of like, well, let's fit in as many technologies as we can and grow. So that's sort of how we made some of our technical decisions.
Cool. Very cool. Another round of applause for Guardian Angel. Oh, I see some snaps too. There we go. Oh, and virtual claps. Wow, this crowd is great. Okay, so next group has a video, and Aaron is setting it all up. Please give a nice warm welcome for Red Horizon.
Hello, this is a group project that I, Charles Banks, Carissa Lujan, and Marshall Hotelling worked on together. Picture a time when you were a kid and you were at one of those interactive museums. Remember when you saw the massive model of a rocket? There was probably like a TV nearby that had footage of astronauts doing cool guy stuff. And you probably saw models of other planets, and then you heard and even understood that even light has a speed and that the space it has to cross is so vast that it takes 8 minutes to get to us, and suddenly anything and everything was possible. While we haven't created a museum, we aimed to capture that feeling of wonder and exploration. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do the ocean floor, and NASA's API shows that. We have access to thousands and thousands of data points, from mineral content to panoramic views of Martian regions that the general public hasn't seen because we have all barely seen the highlights through whatever media we interact with. We want to remedy the mindless scrolling with scrolling them out for something more substantial and maybe wonder inspiring. And to that end, Red Horizon.
Hi, I'm Carissa. Welcome to Red Horizon, a Mars exploratory app where you can discover the various surface features of Mars. You can also learn more about the rover missions and its moons. Just click on one of the GUI targets to see more images about that feature. Add to your list of favorites, expand and learn more about that image, add to your favorites here, and then see and adjust your favorites here. Then scroll back up to discover more of the horizons. We used a robust API dataset from NASA, and because we are a group of 3 front-end web developers, our predominant architecture consists of the user interface, where we used frameworks React, React Router, and Vite, tested using end-to-end testing with Cypress, stylized using CSS. We taught ourselves TypeScript. We also tested our application for accessibility using the Wave and Lighthouse tools. We then ended up hosting our application using Vercel. We used Miro for our design board and included details such as our DOM tree and components to lay out how we wanted to code our components in React. We also included data points so we could design how we wanted this information to be presented to our users. We also included design themes with colors and fonts, and then created our wireframes. Initially, we wanted to include more information on the single media details, including cameras used, a photographer if there is one, and keywords. The challenge we faced included the scale of the data we were working with and the nested attributes to access that information. Given the time limit for the project, we made a group decision to include the information nested in the same object as the photo. To upscale, we would have loved to create more of the interactive targets on our portion to include additional features of the surface. To upscale even further, it'd be awesome to create more paths to different planets and the sun.
Through completing this project, we taught ourselves TypeScript, since it's widely used in industry, and that's most likely the syntax we'd be working in ourselves when we got into industry. We also used React Router, and because of the utility of forward and backward navigation and just ease of navigation overall. The biggest challenge we probably faced was using Vite and its interaction with browser extensions, which causes a lot of runtime errors in loading the page. If we were to do it again, we probably would do create React app, as you just don't get those runtime errors at all. This is our first time working with a large-scale API requiring several fetch calls to grab a bunch of data. from a single source. Originally, we thought that we would need to have a bunch of separate fetch calls for each of our targets on the Mars landing page, just that map there of the planet. Using Postman, though, we were able to test calls, and we discovered a dynamic way of making those calls, which if you check this out here, we have one fetch call overall that utilizes different search media to pull all of our data into the project. So that was a pretty cool discovery for us. And then here we're pulling out the specifics that we need. This way of writing them more dynamically rather than writing each call individually by itself just made it a lot easier to grab everything we needed.
All right. Round of applause for Red Horizon. Cool.
We're open for questions as well.
Great. Yes. Questions from the judges. I have a question, if I may. Um, you had mentioned that you were struggling with like react times, or no? I can't remember what you had said, Charles. But was there any other large pivots that you had to do based on like your design, where you initially wanted to go one way, and then you're like, okay, this is not going to work. We got to do it this way.
I will say for how we thought of it initially, we pretty much stuck to the what you see is basically what we had thought up to do in the first place. It was more in the changing of how we were grabbing all the stuff for it. The runtime errors, I think, is the ones that I was mentioning.
That's what. Mhm.
Yeah, and that had to do with like a conflict, and I'm still not super clear on it. That was something I needed to delve more into, but it's like a conflict between how Vite reacts with the browser and how
Mhm.
it talks to it. And we used Vite because it was like it was the one of the newer things and everybody was starting to use it. And then we used it and we were like, holy crap, there's way more stuff here. We should have waited till everybody figured out how to make it talk to the browser. But so it was one of those kind of situations. So that was mainly why those were happening. But once we ironed out how to do the API calls and everything, it like got a lot better. Once we redesigned how we were grabbing all that, it made it a lot easier to populate the page and everything. So
That's cool. Yeah, even with those challenges, now you're able to speak a little bit about Vite, whereas maybe if you ran into that challenge and you're like, okay, never mind, I don't want to deal with this, you wouldn't have been able to do that. So
yeah,
good for
exactly.
you all. Stephanie, you have a question.
Yeah, so I'm curious if you thought about if this application were to scale, if there is maybe any code that you can think could be a problem or become tech debt that you think you might need to refactor, or just kind of thinking about the overall architecture. If this were to scale, is there anything that you would need to consider with how your code is currently built?
I can take that one, Charles. We did run into a bit of an issue because we were still fairly new at working with the React framework, and we tested out our endpoint to get all Mars media, so everything that involves the surface features of Mars, and we wrote that into a component. And then we figured out how to write it dynamically with all of our other endpoints. So we had two components that were structured fairly the same and had to refactor it down to one component, which then ended up being the dynamic media portion. So I think we addressed some of those issues for upscale already. Looking at the code now, if we upscaled more, I think it would be easy to adjust that our fetch call for get to add additional queries for more locations on Mars. So I think we're set up in a pretty decent spot to make it bigger.
I would more have to work with the stability of the um, calls sometimes because if it reloads more than a few times, we start to get a couple of errors. But that's I think we got it down pretty good to where we got that mostly under control.
Great. Any other? Oh, Sally.
This is really cool. I am curious if y'all had to start over, is there anything you would do differently?
Probably.
Yes,
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
go ahead, Charles.
We would probably use Create React App rather than with Vite, just because you don't run into the same kind of runtime errors with that. And even though that's like that process is going away, it would solve that issue just inherently. But you know, through struggle comes learning. So
Sure does. Cool. Was there anything else? Was there something different that you were going to say, Carissa?
I was going to speak about that, but I think I mentioned it in the presentation, but we also wanted to include more information when you pull up the detailed view of the image. So things like the camera, location, there was more information that was nested in the data, but it was so nested, it became difficult to try to gather all of that and put it on the same page. If given unlimited time, we would have thrown as much detail on that detailed page as we possibly could.
All right. Any other questions from the judges? All right. One last round of applause for Red Horizon and Chris and Charles zooming in all the way from the International Space Station. Really appreciate that. My one joke for the day. I hope it was good enough. All right, we're gonna move on to the next group, Dax Records. If you'd like to share your screen.
Did you say Stacks?
I said Stax Records.
Cool. I thought you said Dax at first. I was like, Dax Shepard has a record?
Yeah.
Um,
No.
sure. So our flow is going to be live. I'm going to just speak to the inspiration of the application, and then I'll pass it to my teammate Adam, and he will run us through the user flow. Dad's records. Yeah, exactly, right? Maybe I need some better headphones. Anyway, and then our third member, Peter, will discuss our tech stack and the backend. So, in a nut, Stacks Records is an application whose initial goal was really just to uh, have front end folks stretch into the back end. One thing that I realized as I started to job hunt through the middle of Mod 3 was that I was just seeing a lot of I was seeing more back end jobs. I was seeing a lot of full stack stuff, and I started to feel like I just graduated out of Turing 3 weeks ago tomorrow with the 2403 cohort. So I started to realize that I don't want to graduate from Turing with a non-zero level of backend experience. So as we were running through our capstone, I pitched this project idea to Adam and Peter, and we decided that it was going to be sort of the thing that should keep us agile and keep us accountable in our first few weeks after graduation. So ultimately, it's a proof of concept application. It may not be as advanced or as polished as some others, but one thing that we're really proud of is that it is a fluent application. We built it up from scratch, front end and back end. But what it actually is right now is just a place for a user to peruse records and to select them as favorites, to remove them as favorites. There's even a post feature where a user could add to the database that we put together. So I will hand it to Adam, and he will run us through the user flow. Adam?
Hey everyone, I'm Adam. My pronouns are he, him. I'm gonna get the screen shared up for you guys. Alrighty. Yeah, so this is our application on load through our Vercel URL. It'll take you to the Stacks app. Uh, you'll see this login page. When you click the login button, it'll take you to a separate page that's auth0, which we use to authenticate our user logins. You can either sign up with their service or use a Google email if you have one. I'll go ahead and use Google. It'll redirect you back to our landing page after you're authenticated. And it brings up our our seeded database of albums that we have for the users to pick through, so they can get their stack going. If you go to my stack, I have a couple records I've already selected and it allows me to toss it, take it away. But let's go back. Oh, but let's pick out some more. So let's add back, and it takes you and shows that it added it. And if I wanted to see some more details to the of that a specific album, I can click on it. Let's listen to some Radiohead. I accidentally tossed it out. Let's listen to Outcast, and then you can hear the YouTube actually play. Get some extra details. Some ghetto music for you guys. Yeah, and then if you go to the not my stack, sorry. If you go to here and you don't see an album you necessarily like, or you want to add your own album to the database, you can go to the add stack feature and it allows you to post a new album. We also have a search bar and a genre selector so you can filter out which albums that are available to you to select. So I'll pass it over to Kyle so he can go over the add stack section for you guys.
Okay. Now, obviously, with vinyl records is what this is ultimately aimed at. Sort of a mashup between Yelp and Discogs is kind of what we were aiming for, where users can post records. Ultimately, we wanted to get to a review feature, which we'll talk about in our further iterations down the line. But there's a pretty high level of barrier for posting, and right now that's just because uh, I literally hand rolled everything in the database. So there's 24 albums in the database right now, which is obviously really small. But the reason I wanted to make this such a high level of entry is I just kind of wanted uniform data integrity right now in the beginning. I wanted every single album to have all the same properties, and it just made the front end rendering a little bit more straightforward. We would have a little bit less error handling. Obviously, that's not the way all data is going to go, and that's something we can speak about with future iterations as well. But so I already did all the homework for all this. Looking up a URL to have the playlist so a user could actually listen to the music, the image, and looking up albums sold. This is an approximation. That's something another like data validation is in our future iteration plan as well. Are they still together? Nas is a single artist, so by default, I believe all his body parts are together. This should take us back to the landing page where the album will show up in the DOM. It takes a little while for it to persist from the database. So if it may or may not, I'm actually not sure if this is going to show up. Okay, cool. So sometimes it takes like 30 seconds to a minute for it to call from our database. They're both deployed on Vercel, front end and the back end. I believe this should function. Oh, cool. So I actually, it's funny that I should see this. So getting the YouTube videos to work was a bit of a doozy because there's all different types of playlists I expect if I chose a different YouTube URL and plugged it in to the post that it should work. But if we add this to the stack, it should function as the rest of the application does. And when we go pick out some more, we are using use state. We're using a controlled form here to search for records or whatever. With genres, that would be something that I'm really excited about going forward because there are obviously like dozens, if not hundreds, of genres, and so we would want a search bar for genres, and ultimately how we would render all the genres. That would be another future iteration thing, but. I will send it to Peter to talk about our backend and our tech stack.
Hi, all. My name is Peter, pronouns he and him. I'll just quickly go over our backend relationship diagram between the two tables. Sorry, that's not what I wanted to share. Okay, so yeah, pretty much we have two tables. We have albums and users, and it's pretty much a many-to-many relationship where users can have multiple favorite albums, and albums can be favorited by multiple users. And kind of just going to the tech stack now. So we used the Auth0 by Okta to authenticate users on the front end and to also protect their endpoints with Auth0's built-in middleware to check whether the user is authenticated. We chose React to build this application as it's a framework all three of us are familiar with since we're all front-enders. And we just wanted to stretch ourselves into the backend to implement authentication as well as implementing routes. With Cypress, we did end-to-end testing, checking the user flow for through Auth0 authentication. So you should not be able to see any information unless you're authenticated. We used Express for our backend, Connects for our middleware to talk to Postgres, and we use Postgres for our database. Yep, I'll hand it over to Kyle to cover some of the questions.
Oh, sure. Well, I kind of wanted to speak to some of the questions that we were instructed to cover with our presentation, if that's okay. Unless the judges just want to dive right in, I'm open to whatever.
No, feel free to answer some questions that you wanted to cover, and
Cool.
then we can give the virtual applause.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the first one we want to talk about was scaling. The next few features we would probably look to implement because since we were building up both ends of the application in real time, it felt like we were kind of juggling, like building up two walls, one brick at a time. So we would probably want to have some level of post validation with the add to stacks feature, and that would require an additional API call, probably to Discogs or maybe Spotify or something like that. That was one. Another one was, since we had authentication down, our next step was going to be implementing like an authorization, or in other words, like an admin feature, so that one could only post records if they were an admin, or if they could allow, users who weren't an admin to post, if they would have to review the post and things like that. And then third, the idea of scaling up the application ourselves using AWS with EC2 instances and EBS volumes, so that we could, if there were a spike in traffic, the application would not be dependent on a free tier Vercel infrastructure. And by the way, we noticed that our Vercel backend was actually being deployed by an AWS instance, so I thought that was kind of ironic. And then the other one was what specific processes did you follow? We were committed to daily stand-ups. We created a GitHub organization to store our front end and back end. We built a project board from day one for ticket dissemination. And there were multiple planning meetings before we implemented any code. We really wanted to make sure that our roadmap was very clear, so that if and when we did run into speed bumps or blockers, we were able to use all of the skills that we had developed throughout the program to get through them. And Auth0 was a doozy because we were implementing that in front end and back end. So how to make this work on the front end, then how to seed that user into our database. It took some time, but I feel like all three of us are better developers for it. And it was just really interesting and fun to build a fluent application like that. We did our best to follow atomic commits, thorough PR reviews, and clear explanation of any asynchronous progress made on the application. I'm open to any questions.
All right, give it up for Stacks Records. Try to say it as best as I can today. Woo! Nice job, everybody. Any questions from the judges? I have a question. You said that all three of you were front end, or basically focused on front end. How do you feel about back end development now? Are you like, oh, I'm so back end development now, or do you never want to work with back end ever again?
I'll speak for myself. I definitely am interested in expanding my experience and my knowledge with backend for sure. I will say that like teaching oneself backend is a doozy. I may be reaching out to someone on the backend side of my cohort and just being like, hey, let's trade lessons or something like that. But I'll let the other team members speak to their experience.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can speak
Oh,
on that,
go ahead,
but
Peter.
yeah, just with regarding backend, I do think like the biggest challenge that we face as front enders is like being able to debug our code when it doesn't work. And that was just hard to figure out because
Mm.
like in the front end you have the browser and you have the dev tools. So you're able to like see most of your errors, but in the back end it was hard to see those errors exactly. And that was I think kind of why I like choose front end over back end just for usability of debugging.
Yeah, for me, I love backend now. I did a mod 3 project and we stretched into the back end, and since then I just want to create full stack apps all the time. That's what I consider myself now, as a full stack developer instead of just a front end, but more front end focused with back end learning skills. So it's nothing that I don't think I can take on, and it's going to be part of my uh my skill set.
That's great. Yeah, props to you three for trying to jump into something new. Yeah, it's really difficult to learn all this new stuff and then you're like, okay, let's start from zero somewhere else. So great job. Any other questions? All right, let's give another. Oh, what? Okay. Rachel, how about you go first?
Sure. Um, yeah, I really love that all of you who are front end really challenge yourself by doing a very back end focused project. I noticed in when you were describing the way that your project works, someone manually creates an album and saves that to the database. A question that I had is, if there comes to be a point where the database is pretty large, could there be a potential use case for making calls to maybe a separate third-party API that has that album info instead of a user creating an album within the database? And were there any factors that went into the decision to design it that way?
Sure, I bet you Peter has something he'd like to say to this. I'll say something about it. But yes, so we considered the idea of just not doing the back end really, and maybe just trying to make the Discogs API work because there is one. And if anyone who is unfamiliar with that website, it's essentially a website that contains like practically every vinyl known to man, like every edition, every cover, so whatever. So we thought about that, but because our inspiration was to stretch, we just really wanted to seed that database into Postgres and then deploy that database. It was really important to us to like get through those hurdles and get that learning in. So when it comes to like the functionality of where our backend is, it's got a long way to go, and that might be part of the post validation like feature. We may have a button that says post with Discogs or something, and it should run through those params, grab the data that we need to conform to our database, and essentially build it that way. Peter, is there anything else you wanted to add to that, or Adam?
Yeah, just to add, I guess because of like how Kyle was able to handle all the data and because like for scalability with as we have more users, I think we would want a lot more albums and titles on the website. So I do think just being able to use a third-party API to kind of grab that data and be able to seed it into our database is like our way to scale up the application. Yeah.
All right, Stephanie.
Yeah, so I think it's really cool that you used a variety of technologies, including Auth. I'm curious about, well, I'm really curious about Auth, but I kind of just want to hear more about your experience implementing it and maybe what about it was the most technically challenging.
Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak on Auth0. I do think that one of the challenges was being able to, um, like once we install the middleware to protect our routes, it was hard for us to like authenticate that token from the front end to the back end. And we realized that was a problem with using the latest version of Node. We had to downgrade our Node version to make Auth0 work. That was just part of the challenge. So just being able to like navigate through some of those like small technical things that uh, make it possible for us to do Auth0, I think was a hurdle where we just don't know like what's going wrong with the validation.
For me, probably the biggest win on the project was seeing the users stack in seeded to the database. Probably a good couple hours was spent on trying to build that column like in our table the right way. The docs for connects are all like 3 years old, and all of the conversations on Stack Overflow about them were like 4 and 5 years old, and so we were just really struggling to find answers when it came to like how are we going to see this user interaction. And so for me, like what I said from day one was I'm not so concerned on how many features this application has. I'm concerned that we all understand the fluent nature of the communication from front end to back end and that we build it all from scratch. So for me, I think what we have right now is a really solid foundation to build on. And, while we're all going through our job hunt, it presents an opportunity for us to stay agile and stay accountable and keep our fingers on a keyboard, making an application and not solving leak code problems. That was kind of really where I came from with it. Not that leak code isn't great or anything, but just nobody's doing leak code at their job. So that was just kind of where we're coming from with that.
No one is doing lead code at their job. Well, one of the quotes of the day. I liked that. Cool. Any other questions? Dick. Perfect. Let's do perfect. I have trouble talking today. I'm sorry, y'all. Let's do another round of applause. Woo. All right. We'll move on to Utah ABA Locator.
So we are Utah ABA Locator. Our main purpose for this site, personally, I have two autistic children. And it was a little bit difficult to find an ABA provider when I was in Kentucky and then when I moved to Utah. So I made it a goal to kind of make a provider list for families to be able to locate providers a little bit easier. And we created this application.
Yeah, my main focus was to make sure the users have the best user experience and user interface. So we used Figma for wireframing and pre-planned everything before Mod 4. We thought about what needed to be included in the website and what we want to have in the future. So every page was carefully planned before being created. And we used GitHub project board to divide the workload. The website is fully responsive and accessible. We implemented Joyride to have some type of guidance for the first-time users. And it supports keyboard navigations for people who can't use a mouse. And we use Lighthouse and Wave to test accessibility. The website is mobile friendly. We use flexible layouts across all pages. Some cool features of our website include find and favorite providers, autism screening tools with a dynamic progress bar. And users can learn about autism and download resources and access useful websites. And provider dashboard, where providers can log in and sign up to edit their own information. And we implemented email.js so the users can contact the admin for any questions, and the admins will be notified through the email.
So for our frameworks, for the front end, we used React and TypeScript, as well as CSS and JSX. We did use several different React libraries, like Joyride, Email.js, a couple other things. We have a provider login. So we have certain providers that do have access to their accounts. They can edit any information that they want to update. We also have super admin for the 5 of us, where we can go in, update any information for any of those providers that don't want to have access themselves, and we can also approve any pending providers or add new providers upon request from our login and usernames.
Hi, my name is Kevin Nelson, and this is the Find Your Provider page. The user can start searching here by text, or they can input a number of other parameters here based upon their needs. And you can see that search narrowed it down from 62 to 14 providers. Then below you can see the search results and view each provider's card. You can favorite and unfavorite. And then when you view the details, if the provider has more than one location, you can toggle between the addresses here. And then something that we're going to add in the future for providers that choose to pay a subscription model or sponsor us is to add extra features to their profile here.
To start us off for the backend, my name is Chili. Our backend consists of a Rails application that manages user authentication and authorization, and a Rails microservice that manages provider information. Both applications are set up with continuous integration with GitHub Actions and uses Heroku for continuous deployment. For the backend application, we used a devise gem with JSON Web Tokens to handle user creation and authentication. We also created user roles for provider admins to manage their own information and super admins for developers to manage all provider information with its own admin routes. For our microservice, we set up an API key to secure the provider information database. With that, I'll hand it off to Austin.
Thanks, Chi. One of our challenges was converting this PDF of inconsistently formatted government data about providers and cleaning the data so our search functionality would be accurate and effective. We cleaned the data and structured the database to ensure standardization for CRUD actions, especially searching and filtering. Additional functionality on our roadmap includes using the built-in devise mailers for forgot and reset username and password. And for expanding to additional states, we'll need to restructure the database for the counties served table and relationships. And that's it for now. Looking forward to answering questions. Thanks for watching.
Nice work, y'all. Round of applause for
We are
Utah
Utah
ABA
ABA
Locator.
Locator. Our main purpose for this site,
We just wanted to hear the beginning one more time because it was that good.
That was so close.
Wait, round of applause again. I didn't see everybody clap. Or maybe you did. I wasn't looking. Woo! All right, great job, everybody. Thank you for that video. Any questions from the judges?
I have one. Can y'all touch a little bit more on how you would restructure the, did you say counties table or database? I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, happy to jump in. So we just have counties right now because we actually didn't spend time making it a joins table. It's just a string, and we just we're only validating it on the front end form to restrict what county someone can enter. But what we want to do is lock the counties down, also have a states table, and then make it a many-to-many relationship across so that it's just easier for querying and more efficient, and the data is validated. So that's the plan for when we expand to other states.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Rachel.
So y'all talked a little bit about cleaning up and validating this data from the PDF that you had. Could you talk a little bit more about this process to clean up the data, and say if the PDF were to change again and again, how would you address that?
That's a great question. We're hoping to just be the replacement for the Utah. We were in contact with a person who quarterly updates the PDF. So we just want to be a replacement for that entirely. There were like over 100 different versions of the basically 30 insurance carriers. So for instance, Blue Cross Blue Shield, but also BCBS. So our solution just completely eliminates the duplicates and issues with data integrity.
Great. Any more questions? Yes, Stephanie.
Yeah, just curious, with this project, what are you most proud of, whether it's, a part of the project or the tech that you have used? What are you most proud of?
I can speak on a couple of things. So with having provider logins, we we didn't communicate this, so that's kind of pretty funny, but it actually ended up working out for the best. So on the front end, we did protected routes with React, and then on the back end, they also protected the routes. So you couldn't just go to like the super admin page if you just changed the backend URL endpoint. Even if you were logged in as just a regular provider admin, you couldn't go to that. That was pretty difficult. For my end, I'm the one that dealt with that on the front end, but I think that's something I'm super proud of because you can't just change the URL endpoint. And yeah, so can't log in without the correct credentials. So it's pretty protected as far as like the user data. So that's something I'm pretty proud of after this project. It was definitely rough for a couple of days, but after that, it was definitely worth it.
And I just want to expand on that for the backend side. So we wanted to do it just because like we're working with providers. Like options were either like hand rolling it or using like OAuth or something like that, except for a lot of providers are probably just going to be ending up using a provider domain type email. So we can just go with OAuth to handle that. So we dived into Devise, the Devise gem for Rails. It's actually kind of complicated because Devise is generally set for a Rails monolith app. So there's a lot of different configurations that we had to mess around with to get it to actually function correctly for our needs anyways. And there's plenty of resources out there, but then each one was not perfectly tailored to what we were trying to accomplish. So it took quite a bit of work to play around with. And then after that, when we set up the API key for API or microservice and the backend was 100 times easier after working with Devise and setting up like security on between the backend and the front end. But I think one of their biggest accomplishments is standardizing the data. Because before providers could just write like for counties served, some of them were like between two different cities, and there's a lot of ambiguity between that. Now it's something a little bit more concrete. And when making the decisions, we had to essentially come up with like the ideal situation. For example, for like a person that's using the site, if they're looking for a provider that is in a specific county, then they can actually know that they'll be covered in that specific area, or at least they can reach out to the provider at that point. But yeah.
All right, great work, everybody. Awesome put in the chat that Jordan also presented this to the Utah Autism Council, which is really cool. Something to be very proud of. Great work, everybody. And this nice round of applause for Utah ABA Locator. Woo! I think I'm making y'all clap too much, but we're having fun. All right. So that is all our groups for DemoComp. In a moment, we'll open up some breakout rooms while the judges deliberate. We're going to open some breakout rooms and allow you to ask questions of the teams. Please don't go into the judges' breakout room. You can go to the room of your choice. Otherwise, feel free to move to a different room if you have questions for another group. Chat, ask about pain points, ask about inspirations, tell them great job, virtually applaud one more time, or snap. There we go. Oh, I mean, I didn't mean right now. I meant so y'all are just doing whatever I say at this point. That's great. Cool. Sweet. Aaron, I think were you creating those rooms? Okay, I see. Now join a breakout room. Cool.
Rooms are open. You can self-select into one. I've named them based on the projects. Only judges and Danny can go to judges only. If you are not a judge and you go there, I will kick you out and I will shame you. So
Nodding my head. Okay, Is that everybody? Aaron, we good? All right.
Yep, they're all back.
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for being here, presenting your projects. Um, Take a moment to recognize that just a few months ago, you had no idea how to do any of this. And now you're presenting really cool projects. So, round of applause for you all. Great work. I hope you feel good about yourself today and your peers. All right, enough is enough. Let's get to what everyone is here for. Um, well, I don't know if that's why. It's really hard to be a host, y'all. Okay. Um, let's do a little drum roll. The second place winner of DemoComp 2410 is 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Hey.
Woo! Round of applause, round of applause. And Rachel had some. Oh, I'm sorry, Seth. Please, would you like to say anything?
Just thank you. You know, it's like an honor, and it was a really cool experience. So thank you, everybody.
And Rachel will comment on why we chose 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon for a second.
Yeah, congrats, Seth. We were impressed with the clean and innovative UI, the logic behind designing the game and providing feedback for the user as they drag and drop, and the consideration of the mobile experience. So, good job.
Great job. Okay, first place 2410 demo comp. Round or drum roll. I was going to say round of applause. God dang it. Drum roll. Utah ABA Locator. Woo! Great job, Utah ABA Locator. And Stephanie has some comments on why we chose y'all for first place.
Yes, great job. So hopefully I can get to all of the reasons. Really, it was one of the major reasons was it was solving a real world problem. It was obviously very well thought out, an important use case, robust features, and it even going as far as really getting some user input and going, I think it was a conference that you might have presented this at. I think that there's, this could be somewhere that could it could be something that's very useful, and I think that that was obvious in the presentation that you believe that as well.
Any comments from Utah team?
Yeah, I have some stuff. I wasn't gonna say it in the chat because it's just kind of blowing it up when we presented, but so we're currently in the process of making this a nonprofit. We are going to expand for Utah first to add occupational speech therapy providers, diagnosis providers that give autistic diagnosis, and then speech therapy. Did I say that one already? So speech and occupational as well. So once we get that running, for just the state of Utah, we're going to expand to all 50 states. Jillian, she's in Mod 1 right now, and she just talked about Maryland, and it's just a complete mess. So trying to just make everything nice and clean for all the states and easier for the parents. Like I know firsthand because I have the two kids, like I said in the demo, it's hard. And it's so time consuming that this could cut out having to call your insurance and see who they take and just going straight to the provider. So it could save you so many months that could help your kids. So that's the future goals. So thank you for voting for us.
Great job, y'all, and great job to everyone. Yeah, I just want to stress that a few months ago, you could barely open your terminal, and look at you now. Or maybe not. I don't know. You have some education before, but whatever. It was really tough in the judges' room. We were back there for a while, and so I just want to congratulate you all on the great work that you've done, and excited to see what you all produce in the future. That's been DemoComp. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much. And don't be a stranger in Slack. Say what's up. Have a good rest of your day. Take care, everybody.